London, 1847. The Royal Academy's Grand Exhibition Hall buzzed with the cream of London society, their voices a gentle hum beneath the vaulted ceiling. Elegant ladies in silk gowns and gentlemen in impeccable evening wear moved between gilt-framed paintings, offering practiced observations on brushwork and composition. The annual summer exhibition had become as much a social occasion as an artistic one, a place to see and be seen while ostensibly appreciating the empire's finest artistic achievements. Adrian Sinclair, the Duke of Westmore, stood alone before a landscape of the Lake District, though his thoughts were far from the pastoral scene. At 34, he commanded attention without effort, tall, broad-shouldered, with features that artists had begged to capture in oils. His dark hair was styled precisely, his tailcoat of midnight blue cut to perfection by London's finest tailor. Society papers called him London's most eligible bachelor. Whispers among debutantes named him unattainable. A magnificent Turner, wouldn't you say, Your Grace? Adrian turned to find Lord Bedford at his elbow, a man whose company he tolerated primarily for business connections. Indeed, his understanding of light remains unparalleled. Speaking of light, have you been introduced to my niece? Bedford gestured to a young woman hovering nearby, her expression hopeful. Miss Eleanor Bedford, just arrived from Hampshire for her first season. Adrian suppressed a sigh. This was the 14th such introduction this month alone. Miss Bedford, he bowed with practiced courtesy. How do you find London thus far? The girl blushed, her reply lost in a flurry of nervous stammering. Adrian maintained his polite smile, asking appropriate questions about her journey and accommodations, while his mind wandered. After several minutes, he excused himself with impeccable manners that nonetheless made it clear the conversation was concluded. Your Grace, Lady Harrington intercepted him near a collection of miniatures. Her daughter, a pretty young woman in her second season, blushed furiously when Adrian bowed. Miss Harrington was just sharing her most insightful observation about Turner's technique. Do repeat it, dear. Miss Harrington's assessment of Turner was clearly rehearsed, but Adrian nodded appreciatively. A thoughtful analysis, Miss Harrington. You have a discerning eye. The conversation continued as it always did. Pleasantries exchanged, subtle matrimonial hints offered, and Adrian's practiced courtesies forming an invisible barrier. 5 London seasons had passed with Adrian maintaining this dance, never allowing any woman close enough to breach the walls around his heart. His secretary, Mr. Phillips, had compiled a discreet list of suitable Duchess candidates at the insistence of Adrian's aunt, Lady Caroline. The list remained locked in Adrian's desk drawer, untouched. Lady Caroline's patience was wearing thin. The Westmore line cannot continue without an heir, she reminded him weakly. Your duty to your title cannot be ignored indefinitely. Duty. The word had become a millstone around Adrian's neck. His thoughts were interrupted by a curious shift in the room's energy. Conversations faltered, heads turned, a ripple of whispers spread across the gallery, until the crowd parted. She appeared like an apparition in dove-grey silk, Lady Catherine Fairfax, the widow who had vanished from society 5 years ago. The moment froze in Adrian's mind, her gloved hand resting lightly on her companion's arm, her copper hair arranged in an elegant coiffure beneath a modest hat adorned with a single pearl pin. She was thinner than he remembered, her face more angular, yet somehow more beautiful, a beauty forged through suffering. Adrian's practiced composure cracked. The glass of champagne in his hand trembled slightly, as memories flooded back. Catherine at 18, laughing in a Hampshire garden. Catherine at 19, tears streaming down her face as she told him she was to marry Lord Edmund Fairfax. Catherine at 20, a distant figure in a church speaking vows to another man. Excuse me, he murmured to Lady Harrington, who followed his gaze and gasped softly. Is that... Well, I never. Lady Fairfax has returned. How peculiar. After all this time and those rumors. Her voice dropped to a scandalized whisper. They say her husband's death was most suspicious. A healthy man, gone suddenly in the night, and she inheriting everything. Adrian's jaw tightened. If you'll excuse me, Lady Harrington. He moved through the crowd with purpose, ignoring greetings from acquaintances. Catherine stood before a portrait of a nobleman, her profile illuminated by gaslight. Her companion, an older woman Adrian recognized as her aunt Lady Beatrice Holloway, noticed him first. Your Grace, Lady Beatrice curtsied, her shrewd eyes assessing him. What a pleasant surprise. Catherine turned, and for a moment her carefully composed expression faltered. Something flashed in her eyes, recognition, pain, perhaps both, before the mask of polite society returned. "Your Grace," she said, her voice softer than he remembered. "How unexpected." "Lady Fairfax," Adrian replied, the formal title bitter on his tongue. "Indeed unexpected. 5 years is a considerable absence." Catherine's lips curved in what society would accept as a smile, though it did not reach her eyes. "The countryside offers comforts London cannot, though I see the capital has continued splendidly without my presence." Her aunt looked between them, sensing the undercurrent. "I believe Lord Spencer is signalling me. If you'll excuse me for a moment." Left alone in the crowd, Catherine and Adrian faced each other. 5 years of distance and a lifetime of regret between them. "You look well, Catherine," Adrian said, his voice lowered. "As do you, Your Grace." "Adrian," he corrected. "We once spoke without titles." That was before. Her gaze dropped to the exhibition catalogue she clutched too tightly. Times change. People change. Not all people. Not in all ways. Adrian stepped closer, close enough to catch the scent of lilies that had always been her preference. "Why have you returned now?" "My period of mourning has ended. Aunt Beatrice believes it's time I rejoin society." Her words were measured, rehearsed. 3 years of official mourning for Lord Fairfax ended 2 years ago, Adrian observed. "Yet you remained hidden at Lakefield Cottage." Catherine's eyes flashed. "You've kept informed of my whereabouts." "I would have called upon you," Adrian said, "had I thought myself welcome." Around them the exhibition continued, but Adrian was acutely aware of surreptitious glances cast their way. Society matrons leaned toward each other, whispering behind fans. Catherine noticed too, straightening her shoulders. "I should find my aunt." "Will you be attending the Pembroke ball tomorrow evening?" Adrian asked quickly. Catherine hesitated. "I had not planned to." "Then reconsider." Adrian's voice held an intensity that surprised even him. "London has been incomplete in your absence." Before she could respond, Lady Winchester approached, her curiosity barely concealed beneath her cordial greeting. Catherine used the interruption to step away, rejoining her aunt across the gallery. Adrian watched her go, aware that several pairs of eyes observed his attention to the returned widow. Already he could imagine tomorrow's gossip. The Duke of Westmore, London's most sought-after bachelor, pursuing a widow shrouded in scandal. By evening's end, Adrian had made little effort to dispel such notions. When Catherine departed, he found himself near the entrance, their paths crossing once more. "Lady Fairfax," he bowed. "Until we meet again." Catherine regarded him with guarded eyes. "Perhaps." As she descended the steps to her waiting carriage, Adrian moved closer, speaking so only she could hear. "I waited for you." Catherine froze momentarily, then turned with a pained smile. "You waited, but very well accompanied, from what I gather." The carriage door closed and Adrian stood alone on the steps, watching as the woman who had haunted his dreams for 5 years disappeared once more into the London fog. That night in his study at Westmore House, Adrian poured a glass of brandy and stared into the fire. His butler, Harrison, had served him faithfully for 20 years and knew when his master required solitude. "Will there be anything else, Your Grace?" "No, Harrison, thank you." When the door closed, Adrian loosened his cravat and leaned back in his chair. Catherine Fairfax, no, Catherine Fairchild, as he'd known her before her marriage, had returned to London. The revelation left him simultaneously elated and disturbed. 5 years since he had seen her last, at her husband's funeral. He had attended out of respect, standing at the back of the church, watching as Catherine, pale and composed in widow's black, received condolences with a dignity that broke his heart. He had approached, offered formal words of sympathy, and departed without any private exchange. What could he have said, after all? That he was sorry for the death of the man who had taken her from him? That he had never stopped loving her, even as she stood beside her husband's grave? Adrian drained his glass. Tomorrow, the Pembroke ball. If Catherine attended, a significant if, he acknowledged, it would signal her intent to fully rejoin society. And if she did not, would he pursue her anyway? Propriety be damned. The answer, he knew, had been decided 5 years ago. Catherine Fairfax sat at her dressing table as her lady's maid, Wilson, removed the pins from her hair. The modest townhouse on Grosvenor Square belonged to her aunt, Lady Holloway, who had offered it as sanctuary when Catherine decided to return to London. "You received considerable attention at the exhibition, my lady," Wilson observed, carefully brushing out Catherine's copper tresses, "particularly from His Grace, the Duke of Westmore." Catherine met her maid's eyes in the mirror. Wilson had been with her through the darkest days of her marriage, and the even darker days after. "You know who he was to me before." "Yes, my lady." Wilson's hands were gentle as they worked through a tangle. "The gentleman you favoured before Lord Fairfax's proposal." "Favoured." Catherine's laugh held no humour. Such a pallid word for what existed between us. "And now, my lady, does it still exist?" Catherine closed her eyes. "It doesn't matter what remains. A widow with my reputation has no place in the Duke of Westmore's world." "If I may be so bold," Wilson said cautiously. His Grace seemed to disagree with that assessment this evening. "His Grace," Catherine replied, "has not heard the whispers that follow me. He doesn't know what they say about Edmund's death." Wilson's hands stilled. "But you know the truth, my lady." "As do I. The truth rarely matters in the face of compelling gossip." Catherine opened her eyes, her reflection revealing a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Besides, Adrian has his duty to consider, finding a suitable duchess, producing an heir. I would only complicate matters." "Will you attend the Pembroke ball tomorrow?" Catherine hesitated. "I had not intended to. But now I find myself reconsidering." She reached for a silver hairbrush, a gift from her father years ago. "How foolish is that, Wilson, to allow a few minutes' conversation to sway my carefully made plans." "Not foolish, my lady," Wilson said softly. "Human." After Wilson departed, Catherine moved to the window overlooking the square. London sprawled beyond, a city that had once been home, then a prison of expectations, and finally a distant memory during her years of self-imposed exile. She had not lied to Adrian. Her aunt had indeed encouraged her return to society. "You cannot hide in the Lake District forever," Beatrice had written. "You are barely 26. Life still awaits you, Catherine." What Beatrice didn't understand was that Catherine had built a life at Lakefield Cottage, a quiet existence of books, botanical studies, and long walks by the lake. She had her small circle of like-minded friends, Lady Worthington, a natural philosopher in her own right, Dr. Bennett, whose research on lake ecosystems had been published in scientific journals, and Mrs. Forrester, whose extensive library had been opened to Catherine without reservation. Yet something had been missing. Perhaps it was the girl she had once been, the debutante who had dreamed of love matches and London seasons, or perhaps it was simply that hiding, as comfortable as it had become, was still hiding. "I waited for you," Adrian's words echoed in her mind. Had he truly? The society papers that occasionally reached Lakefield Cottage had frequently mentioned the Duke of Westmore in connection with various eligible young ladies. There had been rumours of an engagement 3 years ago, though nothing had come of it. Catherine touched the cold glass of the window. Perhaps she would attend the ball tomorrow, if only to discover what Adrian had meant. And if his words proved to be merely polite fiction, well, she had survived worse disappointments. The Pembroke ball was in full splendour, chandeliers blazing, orchestra playing, and the ballroom awash with London's elite in their finery. Footmen circulated with champagne and delicacies, while chaperones maintained vigilant watch over debutantes from the comfort of velvet-upholstered chairs along the walls. Adrian moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting greetings and deflecting matrimonial advances with subtle grace. His attire, a perfectly tailored black evening coat, white waistcoat and immaculate cravat, marked him as a man of both wealth and taste. "Your Grace," Lord Pembroke approached, champagne in hand. "A magnificent turnout, wouldn't you say?" "Indeed," Adrian replied, his gaze continuously scanning the entrance. "Your annual ball exceeds itself." "Lady Essex was inquiring after you," Pembroke mentioned casually. "Her daughter is quite accomplished. Speaks 4 languages, I'm told." "I'm certain she'll make a fine match," Adrian said, his tone making it clear he had no intention of being that match. Pembroke cleared his throat. "Perhaps. Though one wonders when the Duke of Westmore will finally select a duchess. Your aunt, Lady Caroline, was lamenting just yesterday that Westmore Hall remains without a mistress. Adrian's smile never wavered, though his patience thinned. My aunt's concerns are noted, Pembroke, as they have been for the past 5 years. The exchange was interrupted by a ripple of whispers that spread across the ballroom like wind through tall grass. Adrian turned, and his heart faltered. Catherine stood in the entrance, a vision in midnight blue silk that emphasized the paleness of her skin and the copper of her hair. Unlike the widows who favored black and mauve, she had chosen a color that declared her mourning officially complete. She wore sapphires at her throat, family jewels, not Fairfax heirlooms, Adrian noted. "Well," Pembroke murmured, "Lady Fairfax has certainly made a statement with her return, brave considering the circumstances." Adrian's jaw tightened. What circumstances would those be precisely? Pembroke shifted uncomfortably. Merely the unusual nature of her widowhood. Lord Fairfax's death was rather sudden. The rumours are precisely that. Rumours? Adrian cut him off, his tone brooking no argument. "If you'll excuse me." Adrian approached Catherine and her aunt with deliberate unhurriedness, aware of every eye in the room following his progress. Let them watch, he thought. Let them whisper. "Lady Fairfax," he bowed, "you honour the Pembrokes with your presence." Catherine's eyes met his, a flash of vulnerability quickly masked. "Your Grace, I reconsidered as you suggested. Might I request the honour of the next dance?" Lady Holloway raised an eyebrow, but remained silent. Catherine's hesitation was barely perceptible. "I'm not certain that would be wise." "Since when has wisdom dictated your choices, Catherine?" he asked, voice low enough for only her to hear. Her eyes widened slightly at the intimacy of his address. "Since I learned the cost of its absence," she replied. Nevertheless, when the orchestra began a waltz, Catherine placed her gloved hand in Adrian's. He led her onto the floor, aware of the hushed conversations their partnership inspired. "You've caused quite a stir," Adrian observed as they began the dance, his hand resting properly at her waist, though the touch sent warmth through his palm. "I've grown accustomed to being the subject of speculation." Catherine maintained perfect form, her back straight, her steps precise. "Though I admit dancing with London's most eligible duke has heightened the interest considerably." "Let them talk," Adrian said. "They will regardless." The waltz brought them closer than propriety strictly allowed. Catherine's perfume, lilies and something uniquely her, clouded Adrian's senses. She had always moved with grace, but now there was a controlled dignity to her bearing that spoke of hard-won strength. "You dance as beautifully as ever," Adrian said. "Kind of you to say, though I've had little practice in recent years. The wildlife of the Lake District makes for poor partners." Adrian smiled at the glimpse of her dry humour, a part of Catherine he had feared lost forever. "Why did you ask me to reconsider attending tonight?" Catherine asked. "Because for 5 years I've attended these affairs imagining you might suddenly appear," Adrian admitted. "Now that you have returned, I find I cannot bear to wait another day to see you again." Catherine missed a step, recovering so quickly only Adrian noticed. "You speak dangerously, Your Grace." "Adrian," he corrected again. "And yes, perhaps I do. But 5 years of silence between us seems punishment enough for whatever sins we've committed." The music swelled around them as they turned. Catherine's expression remained carefully neutral, though her eyes betrayed her inner turmoil. "The rumours about Lord Fairfax's death," Adrian began carefully, "are not suitable topics for a ballroom," Catherine finished firmly, "nor any room in which we might find ourselves." "Catherine, please," she whispered, her composure threatening to crack. "Not here, not now." The dance ended, and Catherine stepped back, curtsying properly. Adrian bowed, reluctant to relinquish her company. As he escorted her from the floor, Lady Essex intercepted them, her daughter hovering nervously behind. "Lady Fairfax," she greeted with false warmth. "What a surprise to see you in society again. We had quite given up hope of your return." "Lady Essex," Catherine acknowledged. "Some journeys require time." "Indeed," Lady Essex smiled thinly. "And such interesting timing, your re-emergence, just as the statute of limitations for certain investigations expires." Adrian felt Catherine stiffen beside him. "Lady Essex," he intervened, his tone icy, "your daughter appears to be seeking your attention." When Lady Essex reluctantly departed, Catherine's face was pale. "I should not have come," she murmured. "Catherine." Adrian took her gloved hand. "Propriety be damned. Whatever shadows follow you, they cannot touch you while I'm near." She withdrew her hand gently. "That's precisely what I fear, Adrian, that they might touch you instead." Before he could respond, Catherine's aunt approached with Lord Hampton, an elderly gentleman known for his scientific interests rather than social ambitions. "Lady Fairfax," Lord Hampton bowed. "I was just telling Lady Holloway about my recent geological expedition to Cornwall. I understand you've developed an interest in natural sciences during your retirement." Catherine's expression softened genuinely for the first time that evening. "Indeed, Lord Hampton. My cottage borders Lake Windermere, which has provided ample opportunity to study freshwater ecology. Fascinating. I've long believed that our understanding of aquatic ecosystems is woefully inadequate." "Have you read Humboldt's latest work?" Adrian watched as Catherine engaged in conversation with Lord Hampton, her knowledge and passion evident. This was a Catherine he hadn't known, a woman who had built a life of substance during her years away from society's frivolities. "She's quite remarkable, isn't she?" Lady Holloway commented quietly at Adrian's side. Edmund tried to extinguish that fire in her, her curiosity, her intelligence. He nearly succeeded. Adrian tensed. Was he cruel to her? Lady Holloway's eyes were sharp. "Not in ways that left visible marks, Your Grace, but cruelty wears many disguises." The conversation left Adrian disturbed. As the evening progressed, he observed Catherine from a distance. She maintained perfect social form, yet he noticed how she gravitated toward guests with intellectual interests rather than social cachet. Lord Hampton introduced her to Professor Wallace from Oxford, whose conversation animated her far more than any society gossip. Later, as Catherine prepared to depart, Adrian found himself once more at her side. "Might I call upon you tomorrow?" he asked. "Perhaps we could visit the botanical gardens. Your interest in natural science would be well served." Catherine hesitated. "Adrian, a public venue," he assured her, "with your aunt as chaperone. Entirely proper." After a moment's consideration, Catherine nodded. 2 o'clock then. As her carriage departed, Adrian was approached by his closest friend, Lord Richard Huntington. "Westmore," Richard clapped him on the shoulder. "Playing with fire, aren't you? The mysterious widow Fairfax has quite the cloud hanging over her." "Speak plainly, Richard," Adrian said tersely. Richard lowered his voice. "They say Lord Fairfax's death was suspicious. A healthy man of 45 suddenly dead in his sleep, and the widow, barely 21 at the time, inheriting everything despite a marriage of less than 2 years. There were whispers of an investigation, though nothing came of it." "Nothing came of it because there was nothing to find," Adrian stated firmly. Richard studied him. "You know more than you're saying." "I know Catherine," Adrian replied, "and that is enough." Richard sighed. "Just be careful, old friend. The Tun has a long memory and sharp teeth. What is it about Lady Fairfax that has you throwing caution to the wind? You've never shown such interest in any of the perfectly suitable young ladies paraded before you." Adrian's gaze followed the path Catherine's carriage had taken. Because none of them were her. Catherine arrived at her aunt's townhouse, exhausted not from physical exertion, but from the constant vigilance required to navigate society's treacherous waters. As Wilson helped her prepare for bed, she related the evening's events. "Lady Essex was particularly venomous," Catherine said, wincing as a hairpin caught. "She all but accused me of murder before the entire ballroom." "That woman never forgave you for capturing Lord Fairfax's attention when she had hopes for her niece," Wilson replied. "And now she sees you capturing the Duke's attention as well." Catherine frowned at her reflection. "I'm not capturing anyone's attention, Wilson. Begging your pardon, my lady, but His Grace would disagree." Wilson's hands were deft as she braided Catherine's hair. "He danced with you alone this evening, I'm told." "Society gossip travels quickly," Catherine murmured, "especially when it concerns a duke and a controversial widow." Wilson secured the braid with a ribbon. "Will you receive him tomorrow?" "At the Botanical Gardens, yes, with Aunt Beatrice as chaperone." Wilson's expression remained neutral, though her eyes held approval. "Very proper, my lady." When Wilson departed, Catherine found herself too restless for sleep. She moved to her small writing desk and retrieved a leather-bound journal from a locked drawer. Opening it to a blank page, she began to write. 60 May 1847. I have seen him again. After 5 years, Adrian stands before me, unchanged and utterly transformed simultaneously. He remains as handsome as memory insisted, yet there is a gravity to him now, a maturity that suits him well. When he said he had waited for me, I nearly broke. How cruel those words could have been, had I allowed myself to believe them. Yet his eyes held such sincerity, the same clear blue eyes that once promised me everything before duty tore us apart. Lady Essex made her accusations tonight, as expected. The familiar whispers followed me through the ballroom. Suspicious widow, fortune hunter, perhaps worse. Yet Adrian stood beside me, unconcerned with the damage to his reputation. Does he not understand what association with me might cost him, or does he simply not care? I have agreed to meet him tomorrow. Wisdom suggests I should maintain distance, protect both him and myself from further scandal. But wisdom has provided cold comfort these 5 years. I find myself standing once more at a crossroads, torn between safety and the possibility of happiness. The last time I chose safety, my father's financial security over my heart's desire, I paid dearly for it. What price might I pay now should I choose differently? Catherine closed the journal, securing it once more in its drawer. She moved to the window, gazing out at London's gaslit streets. Somewhere in this vast city, Adrian was perhaps looking toward Grosvenor Square, thinking of her. The thought brought both comfort and trepidation. That night, in his Mayfair townhouse, Adrian sat before the fire, a glass of brandy untouched at his side. His valet had long since been dismissed, leaving him alone with his thoughts and memories. He remembered Catherine as she was before, laughing, vibrant, her eyes unclouded by sorrow. He remembered their last private conversation in her father's garden, when she had told him of her impending marriage to Lord Fairfax. "My father's debts," she had explained, tears streaming down her face. "He'll lose everything if I don't accept. Edmund has agreed to settle them all." "I could settle them," Adrian had argued. "Marry me instead." "Your family would never accept a bride whose father gambled away his fortune and good name," Catherine had replied. "You know this, Adrian. Your responsibilities to your dukedom—" "Hang my responsibilities, I love you." But duty had prevailed for both of them, and now, 5 years later, she had returned, changed, guarded, and still somehow the same woman who had captured his heart. Adrian moved to his desk, unlocking a drawer to retrieve a small velvet box. Inside lay a ring he had commissioned 5 years ago, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, designed to complement Catherine's eyes. He had carried it to Hampshire the day he'd planned to propose, only to have Catherine tearfully inform him of her engagement to Fairfax. He had kept the ring all these years, unable to part with it, even when he'd briefly considered marriage to Lady Elizabeth Caldwell. Now looking at its gleaming surface, Adrian made a decision. Whatever shadows haunted Catherine, he would dispel them. Whatever truth lay behind Edmund Fairfax's death, he would face it. 5 years ago, duty had separated them. He would not allow anything, rumours, scandal, or even Catherine's own fears, to keep them apart now. The Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew offered respite from London's watchful eyes. Though still public, the sprawling grounds allowed for conversation without constant scrutiny. May had brought the gardens to vibrant life, flowering shrubs, meticulously tended beds, and trees unfurling fresh green leaves beneath a rare, cloudless sky. Catherine walked beside Adrian, her aunt following at a discreet distance. Her gown of pale yellow muslin and straw bonnet gave her an air of springtime freshness that contrasted with the gravity in her eyes. "For your interest in botany," Adrian observed as Catherine paused to examine an unusual orchid in the palm house. "Is it recent?" "After Edmund died," she said carefully. "I found conventional pastimes insufficient to occupy my mind. Books became my companions, particularly those on natural philosophy. Lady Worthington, our neighbour in the Lake District, introduced me to several prominent naturalists." Adrian noted how she referred to her late husband by his given name, not with the affection of a grieving widow, but with the distance of one acknowledging a past acquaintance. "And your studies brought you comfort." Catherine's gloved finger traced the orchid's petal without touching it. "They brought me purpose. After everything, purpose was what I needed most." "Lady Worthington, that would be Adelaide Worthington. I believe I've read her papers on alpine flora." Catherine's surprise was evident. "Yes, I wasn't aware you followed scientific publications, Your Grace. Adrian, he corrected automatically, and there are many things you may not be aware of about me, Catherine. 5 years creates many gaps in knowledge. They walked in silence through the massive greenhouse, steam rising around exotic plants collected from across the empire. Adrian sensed Catherine's tension easing among the greenery. You seem at home here, he observed. Plants are more reliable than people, Catherine said. They respond to sunlight, water and care in predictable ways. Society is far less straightforward. As we witnessed last night, Adrian guided her toward a bench near a remarkable specimen of tropical fern. Lady Essex's comment, Catherine's shoulders stiffened again. The rumours began almost immediately after Edmund's death. A healthy man, suddenly gone. His family never approved of the marriage. They considered me beneath him despite my lineage. When he left everything to me rather than to his brother, she exhaled slowly. Suspicion was inevitable. Were there formal accusations? Nothing that could be proven, she said, her voice steady but quiet. The physician declared it heart failure. Edmund had complained of chest pains for months, though few knew it. He was proud, unwilling to acknowledge weakness. Adrian studied her profile, noting the tension in her jaw. Yet you've hidden yourself away for 5 years. Not hidden, Catherine corrected. I removed myself from a society that had already judged me. The whispers, the sidelong glances. I'd had enough of being the subject of speculation, first as the debutante who married a man twice her age, then as the widow under suspicion. They reached a secluded bench near a fountain. Lady Holloway settled herself on another bench, close enough to observe but not to hear their conversation. Why return now, Catherine? Adrian asked, his voice gentle. She met his gaze directly for the first time. Because hiding began to feel like guilt. I have nothing to hide, Adrian. Nothing to be ashamed of. I never believed you did. No? Her smile was sad. Not even when I married Edmund, instead of waiting for you. The question hung between them, laden with unspoken history. I was angry, Adrian admitted, hurt. But I understood your father's situation forced your hand. Did you? Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. After I married, you never called, never wrote. Your husband made it clear my attention was unwelcome, Adrian said. He visited me personally to ensure I understood. Catherine's eyes widened. Edmund came to you. He never told me. No, I imagine he wouldn't have. What did he say to you? Adrian's expression darkened at the memory. He informed me that as your husband, he would not tolerate continued connection between us. He implied that any attempt to communicate with you would result in your being removed from London entirely. He couldn't have, Catherine began, then stopped. No, that's precisely what he would have done. He threatened similar measures when I expressed interest in attending scientific lectures. A silence fell between them, filled with the gentle splash of the fountain. He was not kind, was he? Adrian asked carefully. Catherine stared at the water. Edmund was exactly what he appeared to be, a man accustomed to acquiring possessions and displaying them. I was simply another acquisition. The implication in her carefully chosen words made Adrian's jaw tighten. Catherine, did he? It doesn't matter now, she interrupted. Edmund is gone. It matters to me, Adrian said fervently. Catherine turned to him, her expression softening. Always the knight, ready to battle shadows. Not shadows, real threats, real pain. Adrian fought the urge to take her hand. If he hurt you, then what? Catherine challenged quietly. Would you challenge his ghost? The past cannot be undone, Adrian. I've made my peace with it, or I'm trying to. She gestured to a nearby rose garden, changing the subject. The early roses are magnificent this year. Shall we walk that way? Adrian recognized her deflection but allowed it. They strolled through paths lined with budding roses, some just beginning to open while others displayed their full glory. You always loved roses, he observed. I still do, she admitted, though my tastes have changed from hothouse varieties to hardier blooms that weather storms. Like you, Adrian thought but didn't say. I've established quite a garden at Lakefield Cottage, Catherine continued. Nothing so grand as this, of course, but the soil there is remarkably suitable for certain varieties that struggle in more pampered environments. You speak of Lakefield with genuine affection, Adrian noted. Will you return there soon? The question hung between them. its implications clear. Catherine considered it carefully. I had planned to stay in London only a month, long enough to satisfy Aunt Beatrice's insistence that I rejoin the world. But now, she glanced at him, then away. Now I find my plans less certain. A distant clock chimed 3 and Catherine sighed. I should return. I've promised Lady Worthington I would attend her musical evening. Adrian stood. Will you permit me to call on you again? Catherine hesitated, then nodded. I'm staying at Aunt Beatrice's home on Grosvenor Square. Perhaps Thursday? As they walked back toward the entrance, Adrian noticed Catherine's steps slow as they passed a rose garden in full bloom. You always loved roses, he observed. I still do, she admitted, though my tastes have changed from hothouse varieties to hardier blooms that weather storms. Like you, Adrian thought, but didn't say. At the garden's entrance, where Catherine's carriage waited, Adrian bowed over her hand. Until Thursday, then. As the carriage pulled away, Adrian was left with more questions than answers, but also with growing resolve. Whatever demons haunted Catherine's past, he would not let them steal her future, their future if he had any say in the matter. That evening, Adrian found himself at his club, where Richard joined him at his secluded table. Your garden excursion with Lady Fairfax is already common knowledge, Richard remarked, signalling for brandy. Lady Essex is particularly vocal about your poor judgment. Lady Essex can occupy herself with her own affairs, Adrian replied curtly. Richard leaned forward. I've made some discreet inquiries about Lord Fairfax's death. Adrian stiffened. I didn't ask you to. No, but your interest in his widow made it prudent. Richard sipped his brandy. The official report states heart failure, as she told you, but I spoke with Sir William Hartley, who attended Fairfax in his final months. He confirmed Fairfax suffered from angina pectoris, severe enough that Hartley warned him to avoid exertion. Then why the suspicion around Catherine? Because, Richard said carefully, Fairfax died after a rather vigorous argument with his wife, according to his valet. An argument about financial matters, specifically Catherine's discovery that Fairfax had never actually paid her father's debts as promised. Adrian's hand tightened around his glass. What? Apparently, Lord Fairfax merely loaned Sir William Fairchild enough to keep his creditors at bay. When Sir William died 6 months into Catherine's marriage, Fairfax called in the loan, effectively claiming Fairchild's remaining estate. Catherine discovered this only after her father's death. The pieces began falling into place in Adrian's mind. So the argument was about her father's estate, yes, after which Fairfax retired, agitated, and never woke. Richard finished his brandy. The investigation was brief. Lady Fairfax had been seen dining with her husband, then retiring to her separate bedchamber hours before his death. The physician found no evidence of foul play. Then why did the rumours persist? Because Fairfax's brother stood to inherit had there been no will. But Fairfax had changed his will just months before, leaving everything to Catherine and cutting out his brother entirely. Richard shrugged. Motive enough for suspicion in society's eyes, though legally insufficient. Adrian sat back, processing this information. She never told me about her father's estate. Perhaps she thought it would reflect poorly on her, Richard suggested, or perhaps she simply wishes to leave the past buried. What of Fairfax's brother? Does he still promote these rumours? Viscount Redley? Richard raised an eyebrow. Continuously, though most have tired of his grievances. He still maintains that Catherine somehow influenced Fairfax to change his will, though he's careful never to make outright accusations of murder. And Lady Essex? Why her particular animosity? Her niece, Miss Caldwell, was once rumoured to be a potential match for Fairfax before Catherine caught his eye. Then, years later, the same niece was briefly engaged to you. Richard gave Adrian a pointed look. Some women hold grudges longer than most wars last. Later that night, Adrian paced his study, the conversation with Richard replaying in his mind. Catherine had married Edmund Fairfax to save her father, only to discover the sacrifice had been for nothing. The injustice of it burned in Adrian's chest. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. Catherine's return to Grosvenor Square was met with a letter waiting on the silver salver in the hall. The elegant script on the envelope was immediately recognizable. Lady Worthington's handwriting, she murmured, breaking the seal. Dearest Catherine, I have arrived in London earlier than anticipated and have taken rooms at Claridge's. My lecture at the Royal Society has been moved forward by 2 days, which leaves me at liberty tomorrow evening. Might I impose upon you for dinner? I am eager to hear how your reintroduction to society progresses, and I bring news from Lakefield that may interest you. Yours affectionately, Adelaide Worthington. Catherine smiled, genuine pleasure warming her. Adelaide Worthington had been her salvation in the Lake District, a widow of independent means who had transformed her grief into scholarly pursuit. At 52, Lady Worthington had published 3 scientific papers, maintained correspondence with naturalists across Europe, and utterly disregarded society's expectations of how a woman should occupy herself. "Wilson," Catherine called to her maid, "please send a note to Lady Worthington at Claridge's. She's to join us for dinner tomorrow." "Yes, my lady, and shall I inform cook there will be an additional guest?" "Please do, and have Simmons prepare the blue guest room. I'll not have her staying at a hotel when we have ample space here." As Wilson departed on her errands, Lady Holloway emerged from the drawing room. "I take it from your expression that the botanical excursion with His Grace was pleasant?" Catherine removed her gloves and bonnet. "It was illuminating. Illuminating enough to warrant a second meeting, I presume." "He's to call on Thursday." Catherine met her aunt's knowing gaze. "It's merely a continuation of our conversation." "Of course," Beatrice replied, her tone neutral though her eyes twinkled. "And will this conversation eventually address the fact that neither of you has forgotten the other in 5 years?" Catherine flushed. "Aunt Beatrice, my dear, I'm not criticizing. Quite the contrary. When Edmund died, I feared you might never allow yourself happiness again. The way he treated you." Her expression darkened momentarily before clearing. "Well, the past is past. But seeing you with Adrian Sinclair today reminded me of the girl you once were. Vibrant, hopeful." "Adrian and I have much between us," Catherine cautioned. "Not all of it pleasant. Life seldom offers perfect circumstances, Catherine. We must sometimes grasp happiness despite complications." Beatrice patted her niece's hand. "Now, tell me about Lady Worthington's letter." As Catherine related the contents, she felt a curious sense of worlds colliding, her peaceful existence at Lakefield intersecting with her complicated London past. Lady Worthington, who knew only the woman Catherine had become during her years of self-imposed exile, would now witness her navigation of society's treacherous waters, and on Thursday, Adrian would call again. These thoughts occupied Catherine as she prepared for bed, her journal open before her. 17 May 1847. Adelaide arrives tomorrow. A welcome connection to the life I built at Lakefield. I find myself wondering what she will make of London society and what it will make of her. She has little patience for pretense, which will either charm or appall the ton. Today with Adrian was both comfort and torment. To walk beside him again, to share thoughts and observations as we once did, it felt like recovering a piece of myself long missing. Yet the barriers between us remained substantial. He asked about Edmund, though not directly. How could I tell him the full truth? That my marriage was a prison of subtle cruelties and constant belittlement. That Edmund took pleasure in reminding me daily of my fortunate escape from financial ruin, a debt I was to repay through perfect obedience. And then to learn that Edmund had confronted Adrian, threatened to remove me from London if he attempted contact. The revelation should not surprise me. Yet it does. Even from the grave, Edmund's manipulations continue to unfold. Adrian has asked to call again on Thursday. Wisdom dictates I should discourage his attention, protect us both from the inevitable gossip and speculation. Lady Essex has already begun her campaign against me. Others will surely follow. Yet when he looks at me with those eyes that have haunted my dreams for 5 years, wisdom seems a cold companion indeed. Catherine closed her journal and extinguished her lamp. In the darkness, she allowed herself to remember Adrian as he had been today, attentive, compassionate, his concern for her evident in every glance. Whatever came next, she could no longer pretend indifference. The heart that she had believed safely buried beneath scholarly pursuits and quiet country life had reawakened. The question remained whether she would heed its call. Lady Adelaide Worthington arrived promptly at 4 the following afternoon, sweeping into the townhouse with the energy of a woman half her age. Silver-streaked dark hair was arranged practically beneath a modest hat, and her travelling costume of deep plum showed signs of the journey from Claridge's. Catherine, my dear. She embraced Catherine warmly. How wonderful to see you in these urban surroundings. You look well. London air agrees with you more than I anticipated. Adelaide, Catherine returned the embrace. I've missed you terribly. Come, you must meet my aunt. Lady Holloway and Lady Worthington sized each other up with the careful assessment of two society matrons from different spheres, before apparently deciding mutual approval was warranted. Your niece has been a godsend in the Lake District, Adelaide told Beatrice over tea. Her cataloguing of aquatic plant species has contributed significantly to my research on environmental adaptation. Catherine mentioned your upcoming lecture at the Royal Society, Beatrice replied. Quite an honour, I understand. Indeed, though I expect several members will develop sudden hearing impairments when a woman takes the podium. Adelaide's eyes twinkled with mischief. Fortunately, my research speaks loudly enough to overcome such selective afflictions. Catherine smiled, watching the two women she most admired in conversation. Adelaide had been her mentor in scientific pursuits, while Aunt Beatrice had guided her through society's labyrinth since childhood. They represented the two halves of her life, the scholar she had become and the aristocrat she had been born to be. I've brought news from Lakefield, Adelaide said, turning to Catherine. Dr. Bennett has confirmed your observations regarding the seasonal variations in lakeside flora. He's incorporated your data into his latest paper and insists on crediting you as a contributor. Catherine's eyes widened. Truly? But I merely provided observational notes. Observations made with methodical precision and scientific insight, Adelaide corrected. Bennett values your contributions highly, as do I. She hesitated, glancing at Lady Holloway. In fact, I had hoped to discuss a potential collaboration during my visit, but perhaps that's a conversation for another time. Nonsense, Beatrice waved away the concern. I may be a society matron, but I'm not so conventional as to disapprove of intellectual pursuits. Catherine's father encouraged her education from childhood, a progressive attitude I always admired in my brother. Adelaide nodded, apparently satisfied. Very well, Catherine, the Royal Society is assembling a comprehensive study of Britain's freshwater ecosystems. Given your extensive work at Windermere, Bennett and I believe you would be an ideal contributor to the Lake District section. Me? Catherine set down her teacup with a soft clink. But I have no formal scientific training. Neither did many of history's most significant naturalists, Adelaide replied. Your methodology is sound, your observations precise. The contribution would be published under your name, a significant achievement for any naturalist, particularly a woman. The opportunity both thrilled and unsettled Catherine. I would be honoured, of course, but I had planned to return to Lakefield within the month. Are those plans still certain? Beatrice inquired, her tone carefully neutral. Catherine thought of Adrian, of Thursday's upcoming visit. I find my schedule somewhat in flux at present. Adelaide's shrewd eyes missed nothing. Catherine Fairfax in flux? This is unexpected. You've been the model of decisive planning since I've known you. She smiled knowingly. Might one inquire as to the cause of this uncertainty? Before Catherine could formulate a response, Wilson appeared at the drawing-room door. Excuse me, my lady. His Grace, the Duke of Westmore, has called. I informed him you were engaged with guests, but he asked me to deliver this. Wilson presented a small package wrapped in silver paper, tied with blue ribbon. Thank you, Wilson. Catherine accepted the package, aware of Adelaide's raised eyebrow and Aunt Beatrice's poorly concealed smile. Shall I send a response, my lady? Please inform His Grace that I thank him for his thoughtfulness and look forward to our appointment tomorrow. When Wilson withdrew, Adelaide leaned forward. The Duke of Westmore, Catherine, you've been holding out on me. Is this the cause of your flux? Catherine carefully untied the ribbon. Inside the package lay a small volume bound in green leather, on the classification of alpine flora, by Sir Joseph Thornton. A note in Adrian's bold handwriting was tucked inside the cover. Catherine, our conversation at Kew reminded me of this volume. Thornton's observations on resilient species that thrive despite harsh conditions made me think of you. Until tomorrow. Yours, Adrian. Well, Adelaide prompted. Don't keep us in suspense, dear. Catherine passed the book to Adelaide, who examined it with professional interest. Thornton's work? Excellent taste, and remarkably thoughtful. This is not a volume one finds in typical aristocratic libraries. She glanced at Catherine. The Duke of Westmore is a man of unexpected depths, it seems. Adrian and Catherine were quite close before her marriage to Lord Fairfax, Beatrice supplied, ignoring Catherine's warning glance. Their renewed acquaintance has been the talk of London this past week. Indeed, Adelaide's expression grew serious. Catherine, you never mentioned a prior attachment when you came to Lakefield. It was painful to discuss. Catherine reclaimed the book, her fingers tracing its spine. Adrian and I had an understanding, unofficial but nonetheless real. When my father's financial situation deteriorated, Lord Fairfax offered marriage and settlement of all debts. Duty required I accept. Ah, Adelaide nodded slowly. And now as a widow of independent means you find yourself free to follow your heart rather than duty. It's not so simple, Catherine sighed. Society has a long memory, Adelaide. The circumstances of Edmund's death, the rumours that followed, they create complications for any potential relationship, particularly with someone of Adrian's standing. Complications, Adelaide scoffed. In my experience, society's disapproval is directly proportional to the happiness one might achieve by ignoring it. She set down her teacup firmly. Catherine, when you came to Lakefield, you were a shadow, a young woman who had forgotten how to smile. Whatever your husband did to you, and I suspect it was considerable, he doesn't deserve to control your future from the grave. Adelaide, Beatrice exclaimed, though her tone held more surprise than censure. Forgive my bluntness, Lady Holloway, but I've spent 5 years watching Catherine rebuild herself piece by piece. If this Duke represents a chance at genuine happiness, I'll not stand by while society's wagging tongues deprive her of it. Catherine felt tears threaten. You don't understand the power of scandal in these circles, Adelaide. Adrian's position is secure enough to weather gossip, Adelaide finished firmly. A duke is hardly at the mercy of drawing-room whispers. Besides, if he's intelligent enough to appreciate both you and Thornton's botanical classifications, he's intelligent enough to make his own decisions regarding acceptable risks. As dinner was announced, Catherine found herself considering Adelaide's perspective. The scientific mindset valued evidence over rumour, facts over speculation. In the Lake District, among naturalists and scholars, Catherine had been judged by her contributions and character, rather than society's arbitrary standards. Could she find the courage to apply that same standard to her personal happiness? Thursday afternoon found Adrian at Lady Holloway's townhouse on Grosvenor Square. The elegant drawing room spoke of old money and refined taste. Catherine's aunt had maintained her position in society despite her widowhood and limited fortune. Catherine entered wearing a gown of sage green, her copper hair arranged simply. She looked more at ease than Adrian had seen her since her return. "Your Grace," she greeted him with a hint of playfulness. "Adrian," he corrected automatically, rising to bow over her hand. Lady Holloway, after serving tea, excused herself to attend to correspondence, a transparent pretext that neither Catherine nor Adrian challenged. Though the door remained properly open, they were effectively alone. "Thank you for the book," Catherine said, gesturing to Thornton's volume on the side table. "I was quite touched by your thoughtfulness." "I noticed your genuine interest in botanical studies," Adrian replied. "Too often society assumes a woman's intellectual pursuits are mere affectations to attract attention. As opposed to embroidery and watercolours," Catherine smiled. "I confess both skills eluded me despite numerous governesses' best efforts." "I remember," Adrian said, his own smile warming. "Your father once showed me your attempt at painting Westmore Hall during that summer house party. I believe he called it magnificently unique." Catherine laughed, the sound bringing light to her eyes. "A diplomatic description of what looked more like a misshapen grey cloud than a stately home. I missed you at the Hertfords' dinner," Adrian remarked. "I had hoped to see you there." "I've been selective about my engagements," Catherine admitted. "Lady Worthington's arrival from the Lake District has occupied much of my time. She's staying with us until her lecture at the Royal Society." "Lady Adelaide Worthington? The naturalist?" Adrian's interest was genuine. Her paper on adaptation in hostile environments was remarkable. I'd be honoured to make her acquaintance. Catherine's surprise was evident. "You've read her work?" Contrary to popular belief, not all dukes spend their time exclusively at clubs and racecourses. Adrian's tone was light, but his eyes were serious. "My father valued education above almost everything. The Westmore Library houses one of the most comprehensive private scientific collections in England." "I had no idea," Catherine murmured. "There's much we've yet to learn about each other, Catherine." Adrian set down his teacup. "Richard made inquiries about Lord Fairfax," he said gently. "He told me about your father's estate, how Fairfax deceived you." Catherine's teacup rattled slightly as she set it down. "Lord Huntington should be more discreet with his inquiries." "He meant well," Adrian assured her. "Catherine, why didn't you tell me?" "Because it changes nothing," she replied, her voice controlled. "Edmund's deception, my father's debts, the entire sordid affair. It's in the past. It explains the argument before his death," Adrian persisted. "It provides context that the gossips have conveniently ignored." Catherine stood abruptly, moving to the window. "Context matters little when society has already decided one's guilt. I did not poison my husband, Adrian, if that's what you're asking. His heart failed after our argument, an argument well-deserved, but nevertheless unfortunate in its timing." Adrian joined her at the window, careful to maintain a respectable distance. "I never believed you capable of murder, Catherine, but I do believe you've punished yourself needlessly for 5 years. She turned to him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Haven't you wondered why I didn't contact you after Edmund died? Why I didn't return to London once my mourning ended?" "Every day," Adrian admitted. "Shame," she whispered. "I was ashamed, Adrian. I chose Edmund over you to save my father, only to discover my sacrifice was meaningless. My father died believing I had secured his legacy, never knowing Edmund's true nature." A tear escaped, tracing her cheek. "And when Edmund died after our argument, I wondered if the shock and anger I caused had triggered his heart failure. His physician later assured me his condition had been deteriorating for months, but the guilt remained." Adrian longed to brush away her tears but restrained himself. "You bear no responsibility for Fairfax's death, Catherine. His deception, his heart condition, these were not of your making." "Perhaps not," she acknowledged, wiping her cheek. "But they shaped my life nonetheless. I retreated to Lakefield not just to escape society's judgment, but to find myself again, to become someone other than Sir William's ruined daughter or Lord Fairfax's scandalous widow." Adrian studied her, seeing the strength that hardship had forged. "And have you? Found yourself?" A genuine smile touched her lips. "I believe I have, though returning to London has been more challenging than anticipated. And more rewarding, I hope," Adrian said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment the years between them seemed to vanish. Then Catherine broke the gaze, returning to her seat. "Adrian," she said carefully, "why have you remained unmarried all these years? A duke with your prospects should have secured a duchess long ago." It was Adrian's turn to stand, restless energy propelling him across the room. "I was engaged briefly 3 years after you married. Lady Elizabeth Caldwell, a suitable match by all accounts." "What happened?" Adrian turned to face her. "I called it off a month before the wedding. I realized I was marrying for duty, not love. And after witnessing my parents' loveless union, I couldn't condemn myself, or Elizabeth, to the same fate." "Society must have been scandalized," Catherine observed. "Indeed, Lady Essex was particularly outraged on her niece's behalf." Adrian's smile was rueful. "Perhaps that explains her current animosity toward us both. Scandals united." Catherine laughed softly, the sound like music to Adrian's ears. "What a pair we make." "We could, you know," Adrian said, the words escaping before he could reconsider. "Make a pair." Catherine's laughter faded, her expression growing serious. "Adrian, hear me." He moved to kneel before her chair, propriety forgotten. 5 years ago, duty separated us. Your duty to your father, my duty to my title. We've both paid for that separation. You with a loveless marriage and undeserved shame, me with years of regret. Haven't we sacrificed enough to duty?" Catherine's hands trembled as she placed them in his. "Society would never accept us. The Duke of Westmore and the widow Fairfax? The scandal would follow us everywhere." "Let it," Adrian said fiercely. "I've spent years playing society's games, maintaining appearances. For what? An empty house and a cold bed? Catherine, when I saw you at the exhibition, it was as if time had stopped and started again. Everything between, the years, the pain, was just prologue." Tears filled Catherine's eyes. "You cannot know what you're asking. The whispers will follow us. Your family." "My family has no say in whom I marry," Adrian stated firmly. My aunt may disapprove, but she has no power over Westmore affairs. As for whispers, let them whisper. We'll be too busy living to notice." Catherine stood suddenly, pulling Adrian to his feet. "You make it sound so simple." "It can be," Adrian insisted. "Catherine, I've loved you since we were hardly more than children. I loved you when duty forced you to marry another. I loved you when I believed I'd never see you again. I love you still." Catherine touched his cheek, her fingers gentle. "And I have loved you, Adrian. Through everything. I never stopped." The confession hung between them like a fragile, precious thing. Adrian leaned forward slowly, giving her time to retreat. Instead, Catherine met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that spoke of years of waiting, of longing finally fulfilled. When they parted, Catherine's expression was resolute. "If we do this, we face the consequences together. All of them. The gossip, the whispers, the social battles. I won't have you fighting my battles alone." "Partners, then," Adrian agreed. "In everything." A throat cleared from the doorway. Lady Holloway stood there, eyebrow raised but eyes twinkling. "I see my correspondence took precisely the right amount of time. Shall I assume congratulations are in order?" Catherine looked to Adrian, then nodded, a smile breaking across her face like sunrise. "Yes, Aunt, I believe they are." "Excellent." Lady Holloway entered the room fully. "Then perhaps it's time His Grace met your other champion." At Catherine's puzzled expression, Lady Holloway gestured to the doorway where Lady Worthington appeared. "Your aunt thought I might be needed to provide scientific perspective on the benefits of shared happiness," Adelaide explained, her eyes twinkling. "Though I see my expertise is unnecessary, your mutual hypothesis appears to have reached a satisfactory conclusion already." Adrian laughed, bowing to the older woman. "Lady Worthington, I presume. I've admired your work on adaptive species immensely." "Have you indeed?" Adelaide assessed him with frank appraisal. "How refreshing to meet a peer who reads beyond the sporting pages. Catherine, I approve entirely." "I hadn't realized approval was being sought, Adelaide," Catherine replied, though her smile remained. "Of course it was, my dear. Why else invite both your aunt and your mentor to witness this pivotal experiment?" Adelaide's gaze softened. "Though I confess the results were never truly in doubt, I've watched you transcribe his name in the margins of your botanical journals for 5 years. Catherine flushed. "Adelaide!" "Oh, come now. Scientific observation requires honesty." She turned to Adrian. "Your Grace, I must warn you. Catherine approaches life with the same precision she applies to her studies. Expect meticulous attention to detail in all matters." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Adrian replied, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face. The coming days would bring challenges, Adrian knew. Society would buzz with speculation, his aunt would lecture on duty and lineage, and Catherine would face renewed scrutiny. But looking at her now, eyes bright with happiness, copper hair catching afternoon light, Adrian couldn't bring himself to care about any of it. They had wasted 5 years to duty. He wouldn't waste another moment. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of carefully planned appearances. Adrian and Catherine were seen together at exhibitions, in the park, at select social gatherings. Lady Essex and her circle maintained their distance, but others, sensing which way the wind blew, began to welcome Catherine back into the fold. Lord Richard Huntington became Catherine's unexpected champion, using his considerable social influence to counter the worst of the gossip. Lady Worthington, extending her London stay, added her respected voice to Catherine's defence. "Scientific minds evaluate evidence, not hearsay," she declared at a literary salon, effectively silencing Lady Essex's insinuations. "And the evidence of Lady Fairfax's character is unimpeachable." Viscount Redley, Edmund Fairfax's brother, proved more difficult to manage. At White's Club, he confronted Adrian directly. "So you intend to marry my brother's widow?" he said, his voice carrying deliberately. "Tell me, Westmore, does it trouble you to wonder how she managed his convenient demise?" The club fell silent. Adrian regarded Redley coldly. "What troubles me, Viscount, is how readily some men reveal their lack of character through baseless accusations." "Baseless?" Redley scoffed. "A healthy man dead after an argument with his wife, a wife who inherits everything at the expense of family. The circumstances speak for themselves." "Indeed they do," Richard Huntington interjected, joining the conversation. particularly when one considers the physician's report detailing Lord Fairfax's chronic heart condition, a report conveniently ignored by those with financial motives to dispute his will. Redley flushed. "You overstep, Huntington." "Do I?" Richard smiled thinly. "Sir William Hartley has agreed to provide a sworn statement regarding Lord Fairfax's health in the months preceding his death. Would you care to have your insinuations tested in court, Viscount? I'm certain Lady Fairfax would welcome the opportunity to clear her name definitively. The threat of legal action, and the public airing of Fairfax family business it would entail, effectively silenced Redley. He retreated, though his resentment remained evident. "That was well handled," Adrian told Richard later, "though I'd have preferred to call him out myself, and deprive me of the satisfaction." Richard grinned. Besides, dueling the man would only feed the gossip. This way, the matter dies quietly. "Catherine will be grateful," Adrian said. "She's borne enough scandal without adding a duel to the proceedings." Richard studied his friend. "You're truly determined to proceed with this marriage, more than I've been determined about anything in my life. Then, as your friend, I wish you every happiness," Richard said sincerely. "And as your legal advisor, I suggest we prepare documentation regarding Fairfax's health condition, just in case Redley grows desperate enough to pursue his accusations more formally." 2 months later, St. George's Church in Hanover Square was filled with flowers, not hothouse roses, but hardy English blooms that could weather any storm. Catherine stood before the altar in ivory silk, copper hair crowned with orange blossoms, her hand steady in Adrian's as they spoke vows that had waited 5 years to be exchanged. Lady Holloway dabbed at her eyes. Lord Huntington beamed as he stood beside Adrian. Even Lady Essex had accepted the invitation, though her smile remained thin. "I, Catherine, take thee, Adrian," her voice rang clear through the church. When the bishop pronounced them husband and wife, the Duke and Duchess of Westmore, Adrian leaned close to whisper in Catherine's ear, "I waited for you." Catherine's smile illuminated her face as she replied, "And I for you, always." In the carriage afterward, as they rode toward the wedding breakfast at Adrian's, now their Mayfair home, Catherine nestled against her husband's side. "Do you ever wonder," she asked thoughtfully, "what might have happened had we defied convention 5 years ago? If I had refused Edmund's offer?" Adrian considered the question seriously. "We would have had 5 more years together, but perhaps not the wisdom those years apart taught us." He touched her cheek gently. "The path matters less than the destination, Catherine, and we've arrived exactly where we belong." "Speaking of destinations," Catherine said, a hint of hesitation in her voice, "Lady Worthington has invited us to Lakefield for the summer. She thinks the climate would be ideal for continuing my contribution to the Royal Society's freshwater study." "A working honeymoon?" Adrian smiled. "I can think of nothing more fitting. Westmore Hall is less than a day's journey from Windermere. We can divide our time between both. You wouldn't mind? Many men would expect a more conventional arrangement." Adrian laughed softly. "Catherine, if I wanted convention, I'd have married one of the carefully vetted young ladies on my aunt's list. I fell in love with you. Your mind, your spirit, your determination. Why would I wish to change any part of what makes you uniquely yourself?" Catherine leaned up to kiss him, propriety forgotten in the privacy of their carriage. "I believe I've made an excellent match, Your Grace." "As have I, Your Grace," Adrian replied, returning the kiss with fervour. As the carriage turned onto their street, lined with well-wishers, Catherine squeezed Adrian's hand. "Together," she said. "Whatever comes next." "Together," Adrian agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss as London society looked on, their whispers finally silenced by the undeniable truth before them. Love, given time and courage, remembers its way home. 1 year later, the drawing room at Westmore House hummed with conversation as distinguished guests circulated among display tables featuring botanical specimens, detailed illustrations, and scientific instruments. Catherine, elegant in deep blue silk, moved from group to group, explaining the classification system she had developed for Windermere's aquatic flora. "You've presented the information most accessibly, Your Grace," Professor Bennet remarked, examining a detailed drawing of a water lily variation. "Even those of us with minimal botanical knowledge can appreciate the significance." "That was precisely my intention," Catherine replied. Science progresses most effectively when knowledge is shared widely rather than guarded jealously. Across the room, Adrian observed his wife with undisguised pride. In the year since their marriage, Catherine had blossomed fully into the woman glimpsed beneath her widow's reserve. The Royal Society had published her study to considerable acclaim, and her collaboration with Lady Worthington continued to yield significant findings. Lady Caroline, Adrian's aunt, approached with reluctant admiration. "I must concede, nephew, that your Duchess has brought unexpected distinction to the Westmore name. A scientific salon is hardly what I envisioned, but one cannot argue with success." "Indeed not, aunt." Adrian's smile was satisfied, "though Catherine's greatest success, in my estimation, is less public." "Oh?" Adrian's gaze softened as Catherine laughed at something Lady Worthington said. "She has made Westmore Hall a home rather than merely a grand house, and she has made me happier than I ever believed possible." Lady Caroline sniffed, though her expression held genuine affection. "Well, I suppose that's what truly matters in the end." Later, after the guests had departed and the scientific exhibition had been carefully packed away, Catherine found Adrian in his study. She moved to stand behind his chair, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "A successful evening, I think," she murmured, pressing a kiss to his temple. "Monumentally so," Adrian agreed, pulling her around to sit on his lap. "Though I'm equally pleased to have you to myself again." Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder. "I received a letter from Dr. Bennet today. The Royal Society wishes to publish our expanded study next month, with both our names as primary authors." "Extraordinary," Adrian said with genuine pride, though hardly surprising. "Your work deserves recognition." Catherine traced patterns on his hand absently. "There was a time when I believed my life's purpose was fulfilled through marriage alone, first as my father's salvation, then as Edmund's ornament." She looked up at him, eyes bright with emotion. "I never imagined I could have both, meaningful work and a marriage of equals." "You've redefined what a duchess can be," Adrian murmured, brushing a strand of copper hair from her face. "And in doing so, you've given me permission to redefine what a duke should be." Indeed, Adrian had surprised society by taking an active interest in his estates beyond merely collecting rents. Inspired by Catherine's scientific approach, he had implemented agricultural innovations across Westmore lands, improving yields while bettering tenant conditions. The neighboring landowners had initially scoffed, then watched with increasing interest as the results proved successful. "Lady Essex actually complimented my watershed management approach today," Catherine said with a hint of amusement. "I nearly fainted from shock." "Proof that even the most entrenched opinions can evolve when presented with sufficient evidence," Adrian replied, his fingers tangling in her hair. "Though I suspect her approval has more to do with her nephew's interest in implementing similar methods on her estates." "Scientific progress through social ambition," Catherine laughed. "Whatever works, I suppose." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the ticking of the mantel clock and the occasional pop from the fireplace the only sounds in the study. "Do you regret any of it?" Adrian asked quietly. "The scandal? The whispers when we first announced our engagement?" Catherine considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "The whispers faded, as whispers do when deprived of new fuel. And what remains, this life we've built together, is worth every moment of discomfort. Even Viscount Redley's public accusations?" "Even those," Catherine assured him. "His claims collapsed under scrutiny, and in the end, he only damaged his own reputation." She kissed Adrian softly. "Besides, I had you beside me. That made all the difference." Adrian tightened his arms around her. "Always, Catherine. Always." A discreet knock at the door interrupted them. Harrison, Adrian's butler, entered with an apologetic expression. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace, but Lady Worthington has arrived unexpectedly. She insists the matter cannot wait until morning." Catherine and Adrian exchanged puzzled glances. Adelaide Worthington was not given to dramatic entrances without cause. "Show her in, Harrison," Adrian instructed, helping Catherine to her feet. Lady Worthington swept into the study moments later, still in her travelling clothes, her eyes bright with excitement. "Forgive the late hour, but this couldn't possibly wait. Catherine, my dear, the most extraordinary news." She thrust a letter into Catherine's hands. "From Professor Linnaeus in Uppsala. He's replicated our experimental methods with the watershed flora and confirmed our findings. More importantly, he's proposed a joint expedition next summer to compare the lake ecosystems of Windermere with those in Sweden. An international scientific collaboration? Catherine's voice held wonder. With a woman as co-lead? 2 women, Adelaide corrected triumphantly. Linnaeus specifically requests both of us. It's unprecedented. Adrian watched his wife's face illuminate with joy and knew what his response must be before she even turned to him with questioning eyes. "Of course you must go," he said, taking her hand. "We'll arrange everything." "But it would mean months away," Catherine hesitated. "And the Westmore Summer Festival." "Will proceed admirably under my supervision," Adrian finished. "Catherine, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. I won't be the husband who clips his wife's wings." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve you." "On the contrary," Adrian replied, kissing her hand. "We deserve exactly this happiness we've found." Lady Worthington observed them with satisfaction. "I knew you were the right man for her the moment I saw you appreciate Thornton's botanical classifications," she told Adrian. "A rare combination of heart and mind." Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Catherine stood at the window of their chamber, looking out at the moonlit gardens of Westmore House. "I was thinking about what you said in the carriage after our wedding," she said softly as Adrian joined her. "About our path and destination." "What of it?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I believe we were both right. The destination matters, this life we've created together. But the path was necessary too." She turned in his arms to face him. "All of it, the separation, my marriage to Edmund, the years at Lakefield, even the scandal of our reunion. Each step led us here, to a happiness deeper than what we might have found had the path been easier." Adrian traced her cheek with gentle fingers. "Philosophers have debated for centuries whether suffering enhances subsequent joy." "And what do you conclude, Your Grace?" Catherine asked with a smile. "That I would endure it all again, every moment of loneliness, every year of separation, if it meant ending here with you in my arms." Adrian's voice deepened with emotion. "But having found you again, I'll not waste a single day of whatever time we're granted together." "I'll hold you to that promise," Catherine whispered, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Outside their window, London continued its eternal rhythms, carriages passing, distant voices, the steady pulse of a city always in motion. But within the circle of Adrian's arms, Catherine found the peace that had eluded her for so long. They had survived duty and sacrifice, scandal and separation. What remained was a love tempered by time and stronger for the waiting. A love that remembered its way home across the years and would not be forgotten again. The end. Dear listener, life doesn't always unfold the way we once dreamed. Sometimes we are forced down paths that break our hearts, asked to endure losses we thought we couldn't survive. But as Catherine and Adrian have shown us, even after years of silence, sorrow and separation, true love finds its way back. So it is in our own lives. Time may take people, plans, and even youth, but it never takes away the essence of who we are. Every wrinkle tells a story, every scar holds a lesson, and with each new morning, we are still given the chance to begin again, to forgive, to love, to be loved, or simply to find peace within ourselves. If tonight your heart feels heavy, remember this. Just as Catherine endured the whispers and Adrian defied the world for love, you too carry a quiet strength that no one sees, a strength that has brought you this far and will carry you further still. Close your eyes tonight knowing that everything you've lived has made you wiser, kinder, and braver. And where there is love, truth, or even gentle longing, there is also protection, light, and a deep sense of purpose. You are not alone. You never were. With all our heartfelt gratitude, the Legends of the Fall team. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this unforgettable journey. If this story touched your heart, we kindly invite you to like the video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with others who love powerful love stories, and subscribe to our channel. Your support truly means the world to us. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for helping us stay inspired to continue creating more stories filled with love, redemption, and breathtaking twists. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another story from our channel. Click and be surprised by more emotional tales just like this one. Let yourself be carried away once more with all our heartfelt gratitude. The Legends of the Fall Team.